David Shing, aka Shingy, is an Australian futurist, speaker, creative director, strategic digital consultant, and entrepreneur, known as the Digital Prophet, also the title of the podcast, which we'll talk about in a moment here. He's a multidimensional creative who specializes in advising clients about inventive and effective approaches to optimizing brand value within the digital landscape. He is passionate about educating the masses about emerging digital, social, and mobile technologies. He's worked with large and small companies while co-authoring several technology-related patents. He's also worked as Verizon's media digital prophet, and prior to that, AOL's European head of media and marketing, responsible for 11 countries. It's an absolute privilege then to have the one and only David Shing with us to talk to the Greater Property Group and our agents about branding, marketing, and the changing real estate industry, which I have here. And this applies to you as an agent in 2021 and beyond. Shingy, welcome to the Run GpG,
Thanks very much, man.
Not podcast, Mastermind. So welcome here. Big round of applause.
Thanks, brother. Thank you.
Yeah.
Got the Brady
Thanks for joining.
Love that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you making some time this morning. I told you we were going to chop it up a little bit, talk about branding and marketing and why it matters so much, especially if you're a sales professional, you're some, agents in particular, the real estate industry, agents like to brand themselves. Now, before we get into it, I do want to ask you, in your words, what you do. Forbes magazine, this is really interesting. Forbes magazine called you an artist, a globe-trotting speaker, and a market seeker. Same article said David Shing is a storyteller who identifies emerging trends and inspires clients to think differently. And I said to you on the podcast, I'm sure that those who work with you would agree that that's accurate, but how would you describe what you do exactly?
Yeah, look, I would say all of that. Forbes did a pretty good job of that, which is why I'm now one of their educators. But more importantly, my job is really simple, which is to inspire people to do better than they could have thought they could. Really basic. And the basics of that is, look, we're in a human-to-human business, period, full stop. You're probably going to want to talk about a bunch of shit that's got technology at the heart of it. Fine. Awesome. But at the end of the day, there should be a human at the end of that thing. Otherwise, we're going down a different tunnel. And by the way, if you want to touch on that, that's fine. You want to talk about the metaverse, or clearly with Spencer, we want to talk about Bitcoin or blockchain or Jesus, NFTs. Anything you guys want to jam on, we can. But truthfully, you're in a business to business relationship with humans at the end of it. And the purchase decisions that they make with what you're responsible for are some of the biggest, most stressful elements in their life. And so I think that's some of the architecture as to why real estate agents have done a really good job, or attempted to do a fantastic job of branding themselves, because ultimately the transaction has to feel humanized. We've moved on from 1,000 years ago, when the first thing a real estate agent would do is what? They put their picture on a goddamn business card. And that picture looked like it was taken maybe 20 years ago. And you turn up, you're like, I'm sorry, are you the person that's on this card? Because I don't see that shit happening, dude. Thank Christ, I look a little bit like that sizzle reel still. Thank God. But it's really quite remarkable to me that real estate agents think that plopping your face on a business card is going to be enough. I don't know whether you guys do that. If you do, you better bloody well make it look really personal. It's amazing, because when I ran media and marketing for AOL, I'd have these people pitch me all these different ideas for the media groups. And right before I left the UK, I'd launched a women's site, and fortunately it became the #1 women's site in the UK. But when we were pitching the proposition, I obviously had women in the group pitch it. But they never, ever personalized the pitch. It was bulk standard. Anybody could have pitched it. Anybody on this call could have pitched that thing. And the #1 thing for me is context, right? So what I mean by that, I don't mean right as in right. I mean right. It's bloody context. Because if you think about it, people are making a massive responsibility in entrusting you, perhaps, with one of their biggest lifetime opportunities that they have, on which they may have multiple if it's a wonderful experience. But David, that's why you and I kick it. I think the category you're in is batshit crazy. I would never, ever want to be in your category. It's too goddamn stressful for me. I know it's incredibly lucrative, and I get that. Good on you. And you're all good looking and all that good shit, and that's going to be mass appeal for people. That's great. But when you don't look like an oil painting as I do, you have to find a different vocation. So real estate agents plop their faces on a business card and have at it. But I do think that, it's a different play in a different place. And I know we're not even getting started, but I just want to jump in and say that I find your category remarkable. But I also think there's an absolute change in people's psyche. You have about 18 months left of that radical change in their psyche, by the way. The last 18 months has taught us that people are prepared to change forever. I just came back last week from speaking at the largest HR conference in the Middle East in Dubai. And the last time I spoke there was 2019, and I talked about a bunch of predictions that I thought were coming maybe 10 years from now for the future of work. I didn't expect them to come 18 months. So in that time period of 18 months, what I've found is that people started to go real quiet, particularly in the brand space. They just wanted to get back. They're like, I don't understand this because I'm freaked out. So therefore my brand's going to freak out. So let's just all pause. It was that time was the first time I subscribed to live TV in 20 years because I didn't know what television was doing, but I wanted to see what ads were doing. And boy, they were terrible. It was either somebody selling me the American Pillow, whatever that thing's called, or a Jinsu knife on primetime television, because every brand on planet Earth went, oh my God, my sphincter's clammed up. I don't know what to do here. And I'm going to freak out. As we start to relax, as people start to relax into this hybrid world, there's a truth to that, which is the psychology for people has radically changed. And to understand, I mean, I think what you guys are psych majors, actually. I don't think you're real estate agents. You're goddamn psych majors. And you've got to you've got to read body language. You've got to understand tenacity. You have to understand frequency. You have to understand not just verbal to fluency. Verbal to fluency is the fillers. When people speak in ums and ahs, immediately when I meet somebody and they're and ahing, I'm like, they don't know what they're talking about. So there's this really interesting change that's happening in people's psyche and their relationship to you when they meet you. So, I celebrate and I'm thrilled that there are so many winners in this. I don't know whether it's monthly or quarterly that you do those shout outs, but that's incredible because you've already got that human skill at the heart of it. But yes, I'm excited about your category. It's radically different. It should be radically different. Please don't just put your face on a business card. Do you guys have your faces on a business card? Somebody want to grab one for me right now? Show me what the hell's on your business card. There's no face on it, is there? Rocky, you don't have your face on your business card, do you? Of course you do.
It's funny. We were actually talking.
Spencer, that looks nothing like you. Put that thing down. When was the last time you wore a tie? Last weekend?
Listen, Shingy, we were talking about this. Yesterday, actually. We haven't, personally, I think Nathan and we haven't had a business card in quite some time. And typically, what happens with business cards, they typically go in the garbage or something like that. And if you are going to have a card, you do have to have a call to action, a unique selling proposition, something else, which I'm going to ask you about specifically. But you touched on it. And I want to ask you about the process here just for a minute here. You talked about distilling brands down to human terms, right, for companies so that they can relate to the everyday human, the consumer, the client. How do you do that? What's the process? How do you help companies and brands relate to the everyday human?
Yeah, it's really, really simple and it's really basic and everyone forgets it. So there are three things. The first thing that people typically talk about is their story. So, what is the story of the organization that you work for? What's the heritage of that thing? Why is it amazing? There's this whole lineage that every brand on planet Earth has followed that formula. And we could talk about these stories till the cows come home. In fact, let's do it right now. Does anybody have a Chanel bag? Somebody has to have a Chanel bag on here. Jesus, you're in real estate. Somebody has a Chanel bag. No?
Somebody must.
Nobody has a 2.55
I feel like okay. Crystal Kwan might have one. Who else is on here?
Well, let me ask you a question. Does anybody...
JC has one. JC definitely has one. JC, go grab your Chanel bag.
I really don't have one.
You know what I'm vibing here? I love the fact that as soon as I ask questions, people turn their cameras off faster than I've ever seen before. I'm totally vibing that scene, man. It's like, okay, he's not going to pick on me if I just I'm out, dude. But let me tell you that probably one of the best stories he could ever tell was the Chanel story. And there are two reasons. Everybody know the 2.55 bag. It's the one that has a cross hatching on it. It's leather. It's got a chain on the bag. Everybody know what I'm talking about?
So cool.
Okay, so let me explain. I'll just give me 2 minutes to talk about this. There's a reason why that bag is more expensive than any other bag in its category. And I think fundamentally it's because of its story. It was launched in February 1995. And Coco Chanel's iconic bag, it has cross-hatching on the leather because it matches the saddle blanket where she was taught how to ride a horse from her muse. And she would ride not side saddle like women did back in the day because she wore men's trousers. She rode over the horse. And so that's one thing. So it's always a callback to that. The bag is black because it's the color of the the priest's uniform for the orphanage she grew up in, and the interior of that bag, when you open it up, is burgundy. And it's burgundy because of the color of the nun's outfit. There is a zip in the inside pocket on that bag, and that's there to create, it was there so she could keep her love letters from all the men that she had within her life. And there's also a little tiny pocket on the back that has a curve. So next time you look at it, look at that Chanel bag and see the curve. That curve is actually the matching, that's the smile of the Mona Lisa, which is her favorite painting. The last thing is the chain. There was a first clutch purse back in the day to have a chain. And the reason it has a chain is so she could have a free hand of smoke. So I think that whole story alone is dope. And that is a heritage story. So that's story. The second thing people throw into is performance. You know, this is the fastest growing suburb in the urban area. There are more coffee shops popping up on each corner than we've ever seen before. That's all performance. Blah for me. Totally blah. Performance, if it does what it says on the can, God bless, because that's what it should be. The internet has taught us that performance is everything. It's not. It's not where brands are built. Brands are built on feel or sentient, touch, texture, taste. I have a sense of what's going to happen if I hang out with, Spencer or Rocky. I know what's going on there. There's a vibe with these cats, I think, until Spencer showed me his business card. Now I'm going to call bullshit on that. I'd also say the same thing with Joe. I think, Joe, there are people here that I look at and immediately I kind of get a vibe. And I know what that's going to be. Now, in the real world, that's called sentient. You get in a car, you close the door, kunk. That sound will tell you whether you're in a luxury vehicle or an economy vehicle. The smell of the leathers will tell you there's a value to that. All of those substrates are all based on feel. And feel, God bless, is the hardest thing on planet Earth to deal with. It's the hardest thing to do. But it's the only thing I think people should focus on, you included. I think you guys have done a great job as a brand doing that. As individuals, you have to sort of backdraft into that. And that's going to be really interesting and powerful once you actually do that, because that's where you become iconic. And that's where I think most people should spend their time, the feel. Story, incredibly important, get it together. Feel is incredibly valuable to understand what that iconography can be like. And performance, that's just a byproduct. Because I think everyone would agree that, you shake somebody's hand, within milliseconds, whether you're going to want to trust that person with your one of your largest purchases on planet Earth, period, full stop. But that's just me.
Yeah.
Fahad, yeah, I like Dior too, man. We could talk about that as a story. I just wanted to pick on Dior, but thanks very much for bringing that up.
Fahad. Anyways, we're getting into it here. We're just getting warmed up here, and we're going to ask about brand stories that relate to the everyday professional in a minute here. But what are some of the biggest changes you've seen in the world of advertising and branding, marketing over the last few years? You talked about things compounding or speeding up in the last 18 months or the next 18 months. Yeah. And how would you apply those changes to your business if you were a real estate professional?
Oh, I think
okay.
Yeah, I think the first thing first is people's attitudes have changed, right? We have these belief systems, and I just draw it as a bell curve for a reason, an inverted bell curve. Previously, when things radically changed in the world, you sit in the middle and don't jump left or right. You tend to stay in the soft part of it, because you don't want to upset anybody. You don't want to have a point of view. And guess what? That bell has got really wide, really fast. And if nothing else, the last 18 months, 2 years has taught us that you have to make a decision where you stand. You have to be one or the other. You have to be black or white, red or green, blue or black. You need to stand for something. If you sit in the middle, I'm sorry, you are going to get forgotten about. So point of view matters, one for you, and it matters more importantly for the people you represent, and it matters for the brand that represents you. So those sort of paradigms are very, very important. So point of view is the most amazing thing that's happened. And with that is also understanding that the brand that you have isn't necessarily your brand. It's the representation and reflection of who it is that you're representing. So if you are somebody who only deals with properties in the multi-million-dollar category, great. You've already kind of defined what that brand looks like. If not, you're able to actually forge a different style of brand for that type of acquisition. So you have an ability to reflect the style, your style within the brand and the audience of which you're trying to target. On mass brands that I deal with, same deal. They really have to understand that they don't own the brand, the consumer owns the brand. So can you reflect the types of messaging that they're looking for in a vocabulary? And that vocabulary, by the way, is not just based on verbal. It's based on 3 dimensions, and that's sight, sound, and motion. So obviously you guys are important across social to help that frequency. A lot of that social better have video in it in your business, because that's the greatest texture. It's also the thing that allows people to engage deeper. And it's also the realness, isn't it? And you know that because if somebody told you, wow, that photo looked really amazing because that bedroom looks gigantic, but when I'm in it, it really should have been taken in a panoramic. It probably should have been taken in 4 photos so I could see the dimension. So there's a realness to it, David, to be fair. And that's the biggest change I've seen, which is we're no longer just standing in front of a facade and trying to polish it. We're actually being very real. And part of that is these social platforms that have taken off are very real. They're visceral. And I was surprised by that because prior to the pandemic, right when TikTok bought Musical.ly, which is why it became really a valuable platform in the US. So prior to TikTok, it was Musical.ly. It was really just a platform designed for the kids to collaborate across singing and karaoke and lip syncing. It was pretty good until the creeps came along. So they quickly sold it off to ByteDance. But what's been really interesting about that frequency is that COVID's been incredible for TikTok. And the style of video that gets amplified there is real. It's incredibly visceral. Where everything else that we tend to play around with, starting with LinkedIn at the very top of that tree, all the way down to Facebook and then Instagram, it all gets polished as it goes down. But when it comes to TikTok, the realer it is, the better it is, and more impactful it is, apparently.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth about why you should be thinking video first if you're in real estate. Sight, sound, motion, they all matter. And I think agents, we've been talking about this for months now, is agents need to think video first. I think that's imperative. If you are going to tell your story as a sales professional, brand yourself, you got to be thinking video first.
But when you're when your agents are in market and you're shooting video, are you guys shooting video on gimbal or are you just shooting it straight off the iPhone and the Android handset?
I would assume most are iPhone. Some have, we actually talked about this. I think we talked about this, about shooting vertical or horizontal. Right?
Either way. Well, firstly, I'd only shoot vertical. And if you're going to shoot horizontal, shoot it for the platform that should be horizontal, like a private Vimeo channel or something where you feel like you've got more of a boutique environment. But for me, if I were you, I would absolutely be shooting with a gimbal. So I would be going out and buying a DJI or something where you can literally walk through the house with this gimbal and give somebody a frequency so they don't feel like they're going to throw up. That's why video is very, very important, because I've seen a lot of shaky video out there. And that staccato video style that iPhone gives you, there's no way of stabilizing it. So if you were just to do it with a simple gimbal, and it's like $250, so it's not like a lot of investment. Nathan, I see that you're either agreeing with that or sorry, I actually thought that Nathan was drinking out of a, what is that plastic solo cup at bloody 12 in the afternoon, is it? Almost. But my point is, if you have a gimbal, you have an ability to create something that actually feels like it has more of an ebb and flow, and it's just going to be better quality than the person down the road. I promise you. If you're not doing it, you have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually goes back to, I think we've mentioned this on here, is the reason why vertical or straight up like this is more important as a sales professional when you're shooting is people don't like to be sold to, right? And automatically when they see a vertical, when they see a vertical feed, they think they're being sold to, right? So that's why actually, right? And some companies have actually gone back. I've heard about this, like multi-million-dollar companies have gone back and reshot or cut their videos to be landscape. What do you call this?
Vertical.
Horizontal.
Portrait.
Yeah, vertical.
Portrait.
Vertical. Yeah, portrait. There you go.
Here's the real deal.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing. I would assume that 80 or 90% of your clients, the first thing you're going to do is get your fancy card. They're going to look you up real quick on the phone. It's all done on the phone. So it's vertical is clearly the only way you want to do it, because as soon as you go horizontal, nobody turns 90 degrees. They just don't. And so if you're doing vertical anyway, it's the way that you want to see it. And I assume that all of you have QR codes on your real estate sign. And if you don't have a QR code on your real estate sign, you bloody well should. And they should be dynamic, meaning that if you're having an open day, then the code should go to an open day. And why you are saying, hey, it's me, I can't wait to see you and greet you. I'm the person who's going to be at the door at 1 o'clock. This is what you're going to expect today. And then on Monday, when the bloody open house is over, send them off to a beautiful walkthrough, and it's on your vertical video. Most things that I don't see people do with QR codes is they don't use them as dynamic. QR codes are living, breathing, dynamic environments for you. It should be all on your business cards. They should be all on your real estate signs. It's a massive miss if you're not using them. And the reason for that is purely about being dynamic. So you can send them to whatever you want. you also have the ability to hyper-personalize it. So you have an ability to send somebody to a different destination, as I said. It's just URLs. It's very, very simple things to do. You could send somebody to a playlist that you're going to actually, after you've done a walkthrough, on the brochure that they walk out with, that QR code, give them a playlist that they're actually listening to on the way out the door if they really vibe it. There's this hyper-personal connection points that you have. And the only way to do that, in my mind, or the best way to do that, the most inexpensive and the most dynamic way of doing that is QR codes, which is something I wrote about in 2011, by the way. So I can't believe I'm 10 years. This is like a bloody 10-year-old discussion, but Christ, get on it.
Yeah. And actually, is Melissa, I'm not sure if Melissa's here, but Melissa, she had done some new business cards, and she put the QR code there. And what's better is when you use a QR code with a call to action, obviously, go here for, this is what we were kind of brainstorming, go here for free blanket home warranty program, go here to find out about digital currencies and, blockchain technologies that relate to real estate. Whatever the call to action is, give them a compelling reason to actually scan the code. I think that's important. I think the CTAs, and we're going to talk about USPs in a second here. I do want to ask you about this because I think this is fascinating. I've heard you say that it's no longer about consumers consuming content, right? Those days are over. What we have now is the creator, the curator, and the critic of content, those three, and that we're in the world of personal self-expression as a new form of entertainment, which we're kind of touching on. Can you explain how that might relate to a brand or a real estate agent telling their story?
Yeah. So I think that if you are it and you can reflect that, you do a better job of hyper-personalizing it. There are multiple actions you need to think about, right? So if we go back to the early days of the internet, we talked about personalization, which is, hey, you're in Toronto. Awesome. Here's the weather. That is absolute baseline. The next layer of that is customization, which is you're in Toronto, but you seem like you're into music because I have access to your calendar and you have some free time and I've checked you out on social. Here are some places you need to check out while you're here spending 24 hours in Toronto, because clearly you're not. You're clearly not a resident because you're staying in a hotel or whatever. If you're able to actually glean some of those data points, you're able to create a customized experience. That customized experience also should feel humanized, meaning it shouldn't feel too robotic. It should come from you because, again, you're reflecting the values of this human-to-human relationship. And that's, I think, incredibly important. So that's one thing. The second thing is, if you act like that, then it also shows that you understand the vernacular of what it means to be connected. Because if you're not and you're passive, then, and what I mean by passive, if you just think people are just going to scroll through your content, that's not good enough. So, with your videos as well, there's no reason why you shouldn't put a dynamic hotspot in it that allows people to say, there could be a little blinking thing that says right here is where I'm going to show you into a bathroom. But that point of this bathroom, the thing that I love most about it is it's got these, pocket doors and this view that you can't see in the photographs, but it's incredible. And so I just want to reach out to you and talk about those sort of things. For me, it feels more like you've got these dynamic elements and you care. And if you just passively put up this video that feels, and I'm going to hit on video all the time because I think it's the core and the cornerstone of your business, it's just going to feel too polished. It's not going to feel like it's real. And real is the business, right? The other thing is, the first thing somebody's going to look at, as you said, David, if you've got a horizontal video or landscape, they're going to think they're being sold and then they're going to think it's going to be polished. So you're already feeling like somebody's going to lean back. They've already become the critic. Okay. So if you're thinking about, something that's more curated, the other thing is, if you've got something that feels hyper-personalized, that's been custom to the person and the area that you're in, if that is such an interesting way of approaching it, there's no reason why that person wouldn't share that with somebody else. And they could be saying, we're looking at this property, but this character who's showing me this property is amazing because look what they've done. They've personalized this experience for me in a way that feels like I feel like I'm in it. And imagine that sort of talkability, word of mouth at a dinner party on a Saturday night. That'd be amazing after they've seen an open house with you. And that's the sort of thing that we want. We want living, breathing experiences as opposed to things that feel dormant.
Which is an interesting thought. I mean, at the beginning of the discussion, you mentioned the metaverse, and I'm just like, freestyling here. But how do you think the metaverse will affect the way, people, let's say the real estate industry, how it might help or hurt sales professionals?
It could be very dynamic if you choose to allow people to participate in it that can't participate in it in real time and be there. But the truth is, let me just back up. If you don't participate in the metaverse today and you're super curious about it, just go play some Fortnite and see what that thing looks like. And that's sort of a sense of, you'll get a sense of what it looks like. But if you think about it dynamically and think, well, what does the metaverse mean for me? Is it VR? I don't know how many people on this call, probably, how many people have a VR headset? Anybody? No. Let me just go to the next screen. Anybody have a VR headset in here? No. Okay, if you don't have a VR headset, you're not going to participate in the metaverse anyway. So if you want to participate in it, check out Fortnite. If you do want to participate in it, you can actually have VR experiences that you could pre-send to clients to do these immersive walkthroughs. But if you do a really good job, just with a great walkthrough on a gimbal, it's probably going to be more dynamic for them enough to be able to get them to come and see the goddamn property. Because nobody's probably going to buy the property without actually wanting to touch you in some way and reach out to you and go through a video walkthrough live, schedule some bits and bobs, but walking through it virtually, it always feels a little bit off. It always feels a bit like a game, and it always feels a bit like it's dynamically rendered, and it doesn't actually feel as dynamic as it should. And so I would be careful thinking about that as a strategy moving forward. You're in the
Yeah, got it.
business, period.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation about this. A lot of people are kind of speculating on what it might mean for a lot of different industries. So it's something that will continue to evolve, I guess, as we go on here. And as Facebook puts $10 billion into that space in the next year, 10 billion in the next year in that space. So the technology, we're going to see it the technology is going to explode in that space. So that'll be interesting.
Whoa. Be careful what you say there. The technology will explode.
Well, if you're putting 10 billion in, Shingy, I would assume.
No. It won't. It won't explode. Their marketing will explode around it. But the technology will not explode. The reason I just said that is that nobody here on this call has a VR headset. No reason to have one. And if you did, you'd be a gamer.
Yeah, I've used VR. And it's like, I guess what I'm saying is, like, if you've ever, how many have used VR? How many have put on an Oculus or
pretty much
almost everybody?
Yeah.
Everybody, right? So if you put that on and you experience that, you feel like you're in there. In fact, after a few minutes, you don't even feel like, you feel like you're in that world for sure. Like, you're looking around, you're touching things, you're doing things in that space. I can only imagine what the experience might be like when you spend billions of dollars in a year in there.
Well, let me tell you two things that happened with Oculus so far on the development platform, which I've participated in. There are no biometrics built into the goggles today. So if you're looking at content and I'm laughing and you're crying, there's no change to the content. We still wander around the same room looking at the same content. Second thing is, it's incredibly difficult and expensive to build content that's immersive. Incredibly difficult, incredibly expensive, particularly to make it feel like it's cinematic. So it will actually start in the gaming experience. It'll be a gaming experience is where they're going to spend most of those dynamics, not all of us who are playing around in spaces that are in the real reality. And so there will be a lot of dynamic changes happening there for sure, and a lot of money spent in it. But ultimately, it's not an enormous amount of money they're spending. They'll spend an enormous amount of money on marketing because they've already spent an enormous amount of money on Oculus. And we've all tried it. Nobody really owns it. The number one manufacturer of VR headsets today is Google. Cardboard. Why? Because it costs about 3.5 cents to make it. And all you do is put a stupid smartphone on top of it. So then the pixelation isn't so great. So I'm all about the metaverse. That's great. But we don't have to run to it for the next 12 months. We just have to watch it, participate in it slowly and actively if you're curious. But it doesn't have to affect your day-to-day life. It's just it's a great way also for Facebook to separate themselves from the big pile of smoking shit that they're currently created by themselves.
Yeah, they needed a rebrand. They definitely needed a rebrand. And as we've agreed, the technology will explode in the next year. So moving on. We did talk about this before on the podcast, which again, we'll announce at the end here. But we talked about the fact that consumers see 1,900 media messages a day. Like, this is crazy. I didn't even know that number existed, but 1,900 media messages. And then we talked about unique selling propositions, or USPs, key differentiators. Why are they so important to drive growth in branding?
So unique selling propositions. Without unique selling propositions, you don't stand for anything. That's one thing. So you have to have some sort of, as important as CTAs are, or call to actions to anybody getting something activated, particularly around things like codes, USPs are incredibly important. Why? Because we want to hang our hat on it. Before you lock in a USP, it should also lock in what I would say is a manifesto or a tagline. So the most successful companies on planet Earth have a very simple way of approaching it. And by the way, I'm a massive fan of simplicity. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. In this world that's incredibly noisy, if you can calm things down by offering something that feels like a calm experience, particularly when people are thinking about high value purchase decisions, then I think you literally stand out like dog's balls. I think you literally can carve out a very unique way of creating a dialogue that's different. But that proposition should also be based on simplicity. Why? Because you know this, you all know this. Your attention span is shorter than a goldfish. I mean, so many of you are multitasking as we have this conversation, which is probably 20 minutes too long. Because at the end of the day, if we have a short attention span, you have to be unique in the way that you stand out. And that uniqueness shouldn't necessarily be more is more, because we've already got that. So I think less is more in some of those dynamics. There's a bunch of you from Canada, and if you're in Toronto, you've got the grandfather of modern architecture who did a great job in your city, and that's Mies van der Rohe. He coined the phrase less is more. He also coined the phrase the devil's in the detail. And there's something beautiful about the simplicity of the way that he approached architecture, which I would take that approach for the way that I would think about messaging and ideas, and particularly USPs, because USPs should just be aligned to whatever the customer thinks is the most important to them. And if that aligns with your values, then we have synergy. If it doesn't, you have conflict. And when you have conflict, you're going to spend all your time in negotiation. Those negotiations are going to be no. They're not going to be yes and. And that's incredibly valuable, because I'm sure that the basis of your business is word of mouth. It doesn't matter how much money you try and throw behind things. If somebody says you need to call Nathan because he's one of the coolest cats on planet Earth, or you need to hang out with Lizzie because she knows exactly the way to move to a suburb, and she gets what you need. She not only does she have amazing properties, but she can tell me the types of schools that I think I need to go to, and when I need to get on the wait list if it's a hot school. And this is why I care about her. You get invited to parties and shit. Who would have known that as a goddamn real estate agent? And not just because the person lives next to you. So I think that USP needs to be human truth and human values, period, full stop.
Yeah, I think, Len Wong, the GOAT here on the call, I mean, he built his whole, business empire brand on USPs, and he kept them really simple. I mean, Len had an original USP some years ago. Remember, Len? Right? Your home sold in 90 days or buy it. Super simple. We knew what we get, right? When we called Len, right? And of course, his business exploded because of word of mouth. I mean, it was the ultimate branding. So shout out to Len for that. Okay, a couple questions left. One is, we're on the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution. What is that? Can you unpack that for us?
Sure, I can. So the first industrial revolution was steam, and then along came electricity, and then computing. And the last one, which is intelligence, has been creeping up on us for 20 years. That's little bits and bobs of things that are finding all this intelligence about us. And it starts with your phone. I mean, there are so many people that have things like tracking on the phone, and they have notifications that are happening. Do not track is a new feature that's only happened now, but smartphones have been around for 10 years. So there's been lots and lots and lots of tracking that's been going on. So little bits of information that are being collected on us. Just to give you guys a heads up, in the Internet of Things space, of which you guys obviously participate in, because I'm sure you have a lot of places that want to be smart houses, etc. There's 127 different products launched in the Internet of Things category per second. 127. So there's already millions and millions of devices that are already starting to think about little bits and data. And all those little bits of data collect up to a massive amount of data that will be computed to understand exactly who you are. So intelligence isn't just one big thing that's coming. It's a lot of little tiny things that everybody, every large company on planet Earth is trying to figure out whether they should be the one. So whether that's Google or whether it's Facebook or whether it's everyone else, including Amazon or all the manufacturers, are out there trying to figure out whether they're going to own the ecosystem. Just to give you an example of that, just smart cars alone. And when you think about the advent of 5G, which I'm sure is prevalent where you guys are, 5G allows you, so have you ever done this? You go to dinner with a friend back in the day when you used to go out with people. Remember those days? That was fun. A long time ago. But, you go and try and find a restaurant. You're looking at your phone thinking, why can't I find this goddamn restaurant? You find out you're 2 blocks lost. The reason why you're 2 blocks lost is that signal is going all the way up to space to come all the way back down to tell you you're 2 blocks around the corner to find out you're lost. Now you don't have to worry about that because your signal can go from boom, 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 boom. It goes straight across and there's very little latency. When you're doing that, the database, it's massive. So there's a massive amount of data that's being collected. So to synthesize a lot of that data, particularly around things like smart cars, because we have 5 sensors when we're driving. A smart car has something like 255 sensors. So there's a lot more sensors that it's computing to figure out that you're about to hit a cyclist. So that's incredible. And that data architecture is absolutely massive. So the advent of intelligence starts as something like the phone and it ends at something like the smart city. And all of that together is something that we're all participating in. And how we participate in that is up to us finally to make those choices. So you can choose to participate in it whole hog, or you can participate in it partly, but it's up to you. What's also interesting about this is that how do you participate in intelligence as an agent, is the question I would ask. Let me explain that if you're collecting first-party data on people, which I assume you are, and if you're not, you should be. And part of that is obviously having an agent side, et cetera, and the reason you do that. But if you're collecting intelligent data on people, but you're giving them back an experience that's even better than the data you've collected, they're going to give you more data than you've ever expected. So when you're collecting data, be very smart about it and give somebody back a better experience than they're expecting with the data you're collecting on them. Don't just do the usual standard data collection stuff because it's easy to do. And then you're not giving them any reason to give you any more data because you're not delighting them with something that's super special coming back.
And it's super interesting. So we're on the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution, which is intelligence. So how does that apply to your business? Okay. Is there anything that we haven't covered, or maybe what advice off the top of your head would you give a new agent, a sales professional who's looking to make an impact with their branding? Anything we didn't cover? We did talk about it. Maybe something they should focus on when they're telling their story. And the other question is, does everybody have a story to tell?
Well, let me start with the last one first. Of course, everybody has a story to tell. And we know that stories are they're the basis of every source of human truth. I mean, it's great. Once upon a time is a great way to talk about it. I mean, I imagine the first time you meet somebody, it's like, can I just tell you my story as to why I love this neighborhood so much? Awesome. What a compelling reason for me to lean in on that conversation. And then from there, you start to gather the information as to understand what they're looking for. And very quickly, you're going to understand, based on the psychology and the psychographic patterns that you're dealing with, to understand whether somebody's a striver, a believer, a maker, achiever. Psychographics is your business. Once you determine that, you're able to say, oh, I understand what they are. They're price-driven, or they're location-driven, or they're vanity-driven, or they're whatever. It's got nothing to do with the way they look. It's got nothing to do with what they drive. None of that. It's got to do with their psychology, in my opinion. So story, absolutely. But yes, everybody's story is compelling. Every single one of you, I'm sure, if we gave you some airtime, which apparently we're not going to do today, but I'd love to, it'd be great to hear your story. And why the hell did you get into it? What do you believe in? What do you care about? What's the stuff that you've saved in your psyche that makes you passionate about what you do in this business? I mean, I love that. And so, yes, that's one thing. The second thing is, what is it? What is it that allows people to trust you? And what are you doing to develop something that gives you a point of view that says, this is why you want to trust me? Because the moment they walk out the door, they're going to go see another bunch of agents, because I'm sure your properties aren't exclusive. If they are exclusive, then your job's dead easy, isn't it? Just don't fuck it up. And then if it isn't exclusive, then your job's harder because you actually have to deal with other people. And so I think story is incredibly important. And it's not just about face value. It's not just about the way you look. It's just about everything else. And feel, again, is the most important part of that. So if I was a new agent, the first thing I would do is not put my face on a business card. I'd put a QR code on it. And the second thing I would do is drive that QR code to a dynamic page that allows people to see as much as I want them to see about me in totality. Because if I got Spencer's business card with a tie on it and I jumped on a video call with him like he looks today with the Bitcoin logo behind him, it's probably a different vibe than what I was expecting. If I go to his page and his link life has all of these different dynamics, I could think, this is somebody not only will I buy from, but I could hang out with. Do I want to be friends with a real estate agent? Maybe, but maybe not. But at least you're more open to it. So I would just get a leg up, man, because everybody looks the same in this category otherwise. And nobody should be buying anything at face value anymore. Those days are over.
Phenomenal.
Also, by the way, in the 18 months that I said in the psyche that's changed, because there's so much mobility and people moving houses and that whole psychology of hybrid working environments, you guys should be so busy that this call should have been 15 minutes. Because you're in the hottest category on planet Earth. I can't tell you anybody that hasn't moved. And I'm not just talking about moving physically. I'm talking about moving psychologically, and they're thinking about making radical moves. I got a bunch of friends that have moved to Florida. God bless them in the summertime. I think it's going to be a hell of a scene. And, if they want to wave a red flag, we need more people to sort of maybe wave blue down there anyway, in my humble opinion. But whatever, that's politics and that's the US. God bless.
We don't do that, Shingy. Don't do that here. Don't do politics here.
I'm Australian, man. I don't care. I can't vote anyway. But what's really important, what I think is really important, though, is people are making massive leaps in the psychology of change. Not, I just want to move to this neighborhood just down the road. It's like, I want to move cities. I'm going to go from Quebec to Montreal. I'm going to move from bloody New York to Detroit. They're making radical changes. And those changes are a beautiful opportunity because their psychology has changed. Their vulnerability has changed. Their dynamics have changed. And what I mean by that, you're in the business of understanding people's needs on a 360-degree radius. Not just, this is the place for me. This is the world for you. And here's why, because it opens up so differently. A lot of people, when they come into it, at face value, are going to look at the apartment or the house they're looking at and saying, okay, that's the bullseye. But what's the halo? And how wide is that halo? And is this a good decision for me to move to Montreal from New York City? What is the greater picture here? Before, a couple of years ago, it would have been, here's the property in this neighborhood, have at it. Most of that decision is probably 80%, 20% of its sway. Now I think it's probably inverted. And it's all about the halo. So I think there's a totally different kind of psychology around it. And by the way, that's why you're seeing demand. The challenge in the auto industry, yes, they can't manufacture them because of chip and supply issues, but also the auto industry is hot because people don't want to sit in public transport anymore. So beyond real estate, you've got autos that are taking off. So both those categories, which are pretty big purchases for people, both of them are super, super, super hot. So you have a really agile experience. But let me talk about 3 consumer behaviors before we wrap up here. Things that have changed or things that made people feel psychologically out of the constant state of fuzzy that they've been in for the last couple of years are 3 things. One is comfort. So can you provide them comfort in the decisions that they're making? I'll give you an example. Unilever, realized that in the height of summer and COVID, people were pounding more ice cream than ever before. And they couldn't get them to them fast enough. So they developed a drone delivery service. Their competitor, which was Häagen-Dazs, came out with a container for the ice cream that it's double-walled steel, so it won't melt quickly. Comfort, comfort, comfort. I spoke to the CMO. I did a CMO series of interviews with people. I spoke to the CMO of Smuckers and asked him about his innovation funnel while he was in COVID. And he said, Shingy, we can't even deliver enough peanut butter and jam to people to make them feel comfortable, let alone innovate anything. So it's all about comfort. You get it. The second thing is convenience. What are you doing that's convenient to somebody today? Because we're still in a world where we're feeling a bit fuzzy, man. I don't know whether I should be going out and hugging people. I don't know whether I should. I mean, somebody I just met who recognized me on a plane coming back from Dubai. We were chatting with masks on, but when we got off the plane, we took a photo together without masks on because we're all vaccinated, and he's bloody hell got COVID. So do you think that made me feel great hugging that lunatic? I'm out. So the other thing, as I said, is convenience. What are you doing to lean in convenience for people that feel very kind of disrupted today? Because they're in a constant state of fuzzy and they're disrupted. And the last thing is, and by the way, let me talk about convenience for a moment. Louis Vuitton. I saw somebody loved Louis Vuitton in this list here. Dornaz? Yeah, okay, I'll go with that. Terrible English, but whatever, dude. So Louis Vuitton, they closed in the middle of the height of COVID for their EVIP clients. So their executive VIP clients, they opened the store so one person could walk in and buy whatever they want. The second thing they did was they built this beautiful caravan that they pull out to people's homes. So you could literally walk out your front door and into a Louis Vuitton pull-up store. And they sold hundreds of thousands of dollars on that thing in the first place they pulled up to. So convenience is really important. Comfort is really important. And so is nostalgia. So if you can tap into somebody's nostalgia in their psyche, it's a game changer. Let me give you an example of somebody who did that really, really well. So Cadbury in the middle of COVID were just listening. And they realized that everyone was talking about this product that has not been on the market for 20 years. It's called the orange flavored twirl. So they thought, well, there's so many conversations around this. Why don't we just bring the product back? And they did. And they did a pre-sale as a limited edition chocolate bar. Sold out. So if you can tap into people's nostalgia and their comfort and their convenience, sounds very basic, then you're going to make somebody feel very warm, very fuzzy, and very aligned that you're understanding what their constant state of fuzzy is. Because, people are making decisions to do things. They're making big financial decisions to do things, and they really want to be confident in those decisions. Is that helpful?
Yeah, very. Listen, Shingy, we'll wrap it up there, but guys, I want everybody to pay attention here. This is a very high level conversation about marketing and branding. And of course, when you're talking about the periphery and the 180 that Shingy described, it's about more than just a transaction or an actual product, right? We're talking about branding and marketing, again, at a very high level. So hopefully you guys have paid close attention and there's some takeaways here. David, I want to thank you very, very much for giving us your insight this morning. Changing landscape, that's an understatement, in digital marketing, advertising, branding, especially as it relates to real estate is super, super important. The everyday sales professional and agent. Incredible conversation. The pleasure was all ours, as you know. So I want to thank you very, very much. Big round of applause. Unmute if you want to.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
Round.